Hello, this is Rob Lambert with AssetProtectionTraining.com. Today we start the four-part series on putting your perfect plan together. And I'm excited. I didn't put this site, Asset Protection Training, together to do a course on how to do your own plan. I put this site together to have a number of videos and other training materials to keep you from being hosed and cheated by the many scammers out there. A good half of the people promoting asset protection are promoting something which is going to cause you trouble or fail or is darn right illegal or at the very least unethical. I want you to avoid that. That's why I put this site together. But in the last year, I've noticed that 8 out of 10 people who come to this site wanting to protect themselves talk to me about protecting themselves, and then the next thing we find out is they really can't justify or can't afford to hire me. Well, almost anybody good is going to be expensive, and sometimes you just can't afford. You don't have enough money to justify a real expert doing solid asset protection. Well, I now have a process where those of you who either can't or don't want to pay the $20,000, $30,000 it takes to build a plan can get by with a darn good plan for pennies, at least nickels on the dollar. And I think this will be very helpful to you. When you're done, you'll end up knowing how to protect both your domestic situs and your foreign situs assets. That's my goal. The first video is called The Trust. The second video will focus on the offshore LLC. The third one will focus on a protected bank account, how to open it, and how to add a domestic family limited partnership to include U.S. situs assets. The fourth video will just be questions and any general cleanup material you have. Today, since we're talking about the trust, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on trust. There's over 70 videos on this site. A good 50 of them talk about asset protection trusts in one way or the other. There is literally 2.5 tons of information out there concerning trusts. So I'm going to go over that relatively quickly. But what I am going to spend my time on is the single question you need to answer to proceed to do your own plan. And I'll articulate that question pretty simply. The question is, do I need to include my domestic situs assets? That's pretty much it. Now, I'm assuming you all want to include your offshore situs assets and you all want a bank account. So it becomes a very simple decision. I will explain it to you so it makes sense to you, but candidly, it comes down to one decision. Do you want to include your domestic situs assets? Well, let's get started. You'll all remember this from a video most of you have already seen. If you haven't already seen it, you'll get used to this picture because I'm going to keep using it in this presentation. These are the 4 parts of a perfect asset protection plan. This is pretty much the 4 parts whether you spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 doing it or $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 doing it yourself and doing it right. It's the same process. Now, what are the 4 parts? Well, let's just divide it real simply and we'll go over each of these in more detail. Part 1 is this asset protection trust. It's componentized. You can do simply an asset protection trust. Part 2 is this offshore LLC. I'll explain how they work together in a few minutes. Part 3 is an offshore bank account owned by the offshore LLC. We'll talk about that in more detail today and in the next 2 and 3 videos. The 4th component is this little triangle here. It's a domestic family limited partnership. I usually use Delaware. These are all componentized. You can do one without the others, but that's not how this process is being presented. You will basically be forced to make a decision to have a bank account, which means you implemented this side, an offshore bank account alone, or a offshore bank account with domestic assets included, in which case you'll also do a family limited partnership over here. That's pretty much it. The only time you do the asset protection trust alone, and here we go, this is what the asset protection trust alone looks like. The only times you'd ever do that alone is if you didn't want an offshore bank account. You just wanted a vehicle to hold something like precious metals you had offshore, a piece of real estate you had offshore, a a donut shop you owned in Belize or London or something like that, you could easily and should put that offshore entity into this asset protection trust. To do that, you don't need any other parts of this perfect trust. You just need part one. And here are the components of the asset protection trust. You have the trust company here. This trust company can be in any part of the world. I don't care. For this first video, I'm assuming Belize. I've assumed Belize because I've been able to negotiate great rates and they have great laws, and I'm going to do the very first experiment with this do-it-yourself perfect plan using Belize. I'll add several other countries very quickly if this is accepted and people like it. In addition to this trust company, which you should never, never, never trust to manage your money, you just use this trust company to set up to establish the foreign situs of this asset protection trust. This trust company, which in the case of this example will be a Belizean trust company, licensed in Belize and regulated in Belize, and usually, in this case, run by lawyers in Belize. This trust company will be the trustee of your asset protection trust. This trust company will not invest your money. You will be responsible for doing that. But in the way this is set up right now, you're vulnerable to your trust company. That's why the only things I would ever put under this are gold and jewelry that you kept personal possession of, or businesses that you ran, like if you had an LLC in Nevis that owned a dive shop, you might have that owned by this asset protection trust. But this alone is normally not good enough. This alone normally is just what I call a good start. But the good part is you're normally going to spend $20,000, $30,000 to get a good asset protection trust. I've been able to persuade solid lawyers in several offshore jurisdictions, and this one's Belize, to actually custom prepare a simple, straightforward asset protection trust for your benefit based upon information you provide with the beneficiaries you specify, the protector that you specify, to put your asset protection trust together for you. They will do that free of charge if you hire them to be your trust company. Their fee will be $1,500 a year, except the first year it's $1,600. There are several payment options, and you'll be able to choose between those. They're not stupid. They're willing to lose a little bit of money at first to get you as a client in the long run, because even though they don't make any money in the first year, they'll make great money over the next 20 years, and you'll probably be their customer that long, and you probably will work with them that long. So they're smart. However, remember what I said, this asset protection trust right here alone is normally not enough. You're almost always going to want to add an offshore LLC. And in this case, I want to add an offshore Belizean LLC. It can be in any country you want. Nevis is the most popular, although Nevis is about to be eclipsed by Belize. It can be in any country you want, but the good part is if you have the lawyers doing your asset protection trust also doing your offshore LLC, they've reduced their prices substantially as a package. They're willing to do the offshore LLC for $600. That's a really, really good wholesale price. Normally $1,500 just for the LLC, sometimes more if the agreement has to be custom, and your agreement will be custom. It's an excellent custom agreement. They've worked hard on it, but you only need the LLC for one reason. You see, up here in the Asset Protection Trust, who runs it? The trust company. The trust company is not you. This is you, the settlor. If you trust the trust company to run your asset protection trust, you're vulnerable to the trust company, and that's against one of my first rules of asset protection, which is trust nobody. So what do? You actually put, because we're not using a kinetic plan, which would have you as a co-trustee, that's too complicated to do yourself. It's very sophisticated and quite dangerous to do without really great advice. It's not dangerous to do if you have good advice, and it's a great way to do it. But if you're not going to do a kinetic plan, which I advise against if you're doing it yourself, you do need this offshore LLC. Why? It's so that you can be the manager of the offshore LLC. And where do the assets of this trust go? They go into the offshore LLC. If you have offshore assets, they are owned by the LLC. Why is that? It's really simple. They're owned by the LLC so that you, this person here, manager of the offshore LLC, can remain in control. Note this person is the settlor and this person's the manager, and oh, lo and behold, they're the same color because they're the same people. The protectors and the beneficiaries aren't always the same people, but the settlor and the manager of the offshore LLC often are. So I am going to recommend to almost every one of my clients that they do part one, which is the offshore asset protection trust, combined with the offshore LLC, and then use this vehicle to form an offshore bank account. And this is the way most offshore bank accounts are opened. They're not usually opened anymore in the name of a trust. This is becoming more and more true, particularly as U.S. citizens are becoming less and less welcome by banks. In 2014, we're going to find that many banks don't even want U.S. citizens anymore, and particularly when the U.S. government starts taxing 30% withholding tax at the source on transfers to banks which haven't become completely transparent. This happens in 2014. We're going to find that a lot of banks tell us to just simply take a hike. They don't need the U.S. citizens. Too much work, too much trouble, too much compliance. In my mind, this particular process of the trust company owning an asset protection trust, which has an LLC, which has a bank account, that is the perfect asset protection plan. The lawyers that do the asset protection trust and form the offshore LLC will also provide you with the offshore LLC agreement. They're, again, willing to do this because in the long run, they make money from relationships. They don't make money from doing trusts and LLCs. And they want more relationships. This is a perfect offshore situation. It lets you have companies. It lets you trade any funds. You could put an insurance company under the LLC or even under the trust. You can simply, this opens the whole world of offshore investments. And the good part is everything except the fees for the services to be a trustee and the fees to register your LLC. All of these are standard low fees that I've really chiseled on, but they're giving you the agreements for free. This is going to save you $20,000, $30,000. I'm really proud of it. I'm really glad we're able to get it. And it's something that even if you're using your own lawyer, this can save you a lot of time and money. Well, what's the only other option you might want to do? You might want to make all four parts. You might want to do a domestic family limited partnership. That's right over here. That's this little green triangle. And note, it's on the USA side of this danger line. This lightning bolt here is where this separates safe properties, which are offshore, from reachable exposed properties, which are onshore. USA is onshore. Everything to the left of your screen is onshore. Everything down here is more at risk than everything over here. Why would you even bother to put money into this domestic family limited partnership or other assets such as real estate that you're waiting to sell? Well, it's because the moment you put it in here, it starts the statute of limitations running. If there's like a 4-year statute of limitations in your state, say someplace like California, typical 4 years for New York, they sometimes make it longer, sometimes shorter. Well, if you put, say, money in Bank of America into this domestic family limited partnership, and you do that in 2012, and then you transfer it abroad in 2016 after things start to go to pieces, well, you already have 4 years on your statute of limitations. That's kind of good. You start the statute running by putting your money into this little green triangle. And lo and behold, look who runs the little green triangle. Same little red guy who happens to be you. The general partner has 100% control of the domestic family limited partnership. I'm a huge believer that you want to stay in control. Bottom line is you can get this entire process. Part one, say $1,500–$1,600. Down here, you're going to spend very close to $600, maybe a little bit more when you put couriers and other things, although maybe we can avoid couriers in your case depending on the time. If you're really in a hurry, it'll cost more. And over here, you'll just pay regular formation fees through a really great company called Corporate Creations. I've worked with them for 20 years. One of the founders of it was a student of mine in USC Law School. He took classes from me. And now he's built Corporate Creations into the third largest company formation business in the United States. He will form your family limited partnership pursuant to your instructions. He's a lawyer himself. They will take responsibility to prepare a domestic family limited partnership agreement pursuant to your instructions. It'll be a form, but it'll be a dynamite, top of the line, state of the art, $5,000 type form. And you'll get all of that from them depending upon the speed that you want it. That'll increase the cost, but you figure between $500 to $600, and you've got that done. So for under $3,000, substantially under $3,000, hundreds and hundreds of dollars less than $3,000. In fact, hundreds of dollars less than $2,500 if we really start squeezing, you can have solid asset protection. And that is pennies on the dollar. That's why I'm so proud of this. And that's why if you do this, you need to all understand nobody's representing you personally. We're acting as teachers. It's almost like you have a professor at Stanford Law School or Stanford Business School or me at USC Business School telling you what you can and can't do. We're not taking the position that you need to do this. I do not want to be your advisor. You're not paying me to be your advisor. I'm giving you some solid information, but I'm telling you again and again, even though these are lawyer prepared documentation, lawyer written, lawyer prepared, you still need a local lawyer and a local CPA. Everything needs to involve your local folks. Well, now you've seen the 4 parts, and once you look at all 4 parts, you can see that it breaks down to simply really the following decision. Do you want just the APT? See right here, APT? Do you want just the APT? Against my advice, I don't think this is the right decision. You know why it's not the right decision? Because it limits you to what you can do. Some of you will simply want to do it. That'll cost you $1,500, $1,600. And that's a really great fee. It's an ongoing fee, it's an annual fee, but you're going to have to pay that or close to double that almost wherever you go. So that's your first decision. Do you want just an APT? 99% of you are going to say no. You could just form an offshore LLC. I'm not offering that option. That would be just as expensive as a trust. And the only reason they're willing to do it for such a low price is they're doing the trust at the same time. So I'm including the offshore LLC as a really, really cheap and expensive, beneficial product that you get for next to nothing when you buy an APT. So the second decision is, do you want the APT, the LLC, and the offshore account? Also, with opening an offshore account, I will introduce you to the general counsel, or I have a special agent at Bank of Belize and indeed several other banks that take care of my clients. And they guarantee to treat you like a king. They don't make any money if they don't open an account for you. And they've also guaranteed all of my clients 48-hour turnaround time. I'm insisting on it. That's almost unheard of in most of the Caribbean. But hey, we're bringing good, solid business to good, solid countries, and if they want it, they're going to treat you like good, solid customers. And I demand that. Nobody gets away with any crap when it comes to my clients. So I expect you to get great treatment from the banks. Remember, we're not guaranteeing an offshore bank account. To get all of these things, you're first of all going to have to not only convince the bank that your money's clean, you're going to have to convince the lawyers who run the trust company that your money's clean by signing a certificate of solvency. And they probably want to talk to you, and they probably will do some checking with the databases that these quasi-governmental trust agencies use to make sure they're dealing with people who are not in trouble. So you will be checked out. You will have to pass some basic screening. I'm assuming all of you will. If you're not a criminal, if you're not hiding from somebody who's going to put you in the room with Bubba, you're probably going to be just fine. But that is the process. The first APT or the APT LLC in the offshore account, or the whole kit and caboodle, the APT, the LLC, the offshore account, and the domestic family limited partnership. You can do this whole thing. And for you, it's a matter of making a decision. And in my mind, the decision is, do you want the APT with the bank account and the offshore LLC, or do you want the all of that along with a domestic family limited partnership, so you can include your Bank of America assets and your local apartment house into the mix of the protected assets? Start the statute of limitations running, add some marginal additional protection. The older it gets, the better that protection becomes. In my mind, it's pretty simple. I would do the asset protection trust with the LLC, with the offshore bank account, and with the domestic family limited partnership. For you, it's all one task. Once you make this decision, you simply go to the form that's under this video and click on the button and fill out the form. It gives you the options to buy to buy just the trust, to buy the trust, the LLC, and get the reference to the bank people, or it lets you take all of that and add a domestic partnership. You'll have one form to fill out. Once that form is filled out, it transfers the information to the law firms and people preparing the documents. What then will happen is you will get the documents to you by email within 2 business days, unless there's something that happens, in which case you'll be talking with the people. They may have a question or two. But we're putting a 2-day turnaround time on everybody. Everybody's agreed to it. I'm not sure, because this is a new program, I'm not sure that that's always going to work, but I've been really making a big deal about it, so I fully expect it will. And the good part is that you're going to be dealing with real people. This isn't going to be here's some forms, I'll print them out, sign them, and you're done. There's real players, real live lawyers and other people helping you. And again, the reason they're doing it is not for the quick kill. These people have been in business for many decades in many cases, and they're there for the long run relationship. So treat them that way, and you will find they will be there for you just like I'm sure you will be there for them. Now, let's start talking about the trust. What should you expect in the trust document you're going to get? Well, on the site, we've already given you several decent asset protection trusts that you can download and look at. Well, you should expect a little bit more refined version. The key provisions, and there's videos on every single one of these. But you should expect to receive the trust, certificate of solvency, all the and you will be expected to sign a certificate of solvency. And if you're engaging in any type of aggressive behavior where you're walking the line between a fraudulent conveyance and not, this is not for you. You really need an expert. You don't want to go into the world unprotected, shut your eyes, and hope that you don't get in trouble. There is a lot you can do even if the world's falling apart, but one of them isn't to put all your money abroad and just hope you don't get in trouble. Except you probably have noticed that most people who did that ended up keeping most of their money, even though they did have some problems with the courts. None of my clients have ever had any problems with the courts, and I don't intend to have anybody I even teach have problems with the court. So if you're engaging in aggressive planning, you get some help. Do not do that yourself. Okay, what are the key provisions in legislation that you should expect? Well, one thing you should expect is the trust will have a strong anti-duress clause. That's a provision. We've talked about them. You've seen them in detail. I've actually demonstrated what they look like to you. Well, your trust will have a good anti-duress provision. And for those of you who need a reminder, that's a provision that says don't pay any attention to the judge or anything anybody says that causes me to do anything against what I would otherwise want to do. It basically makes it so if a judge orders you to do something like give all your money that's in the trust, or order the trustee to give all the money in the trust to one of your creditors, the trustee is going to say, shine it on, that's not something I'm willing to do. It would be a violation of my fiduciary duty to whom? The beneficiaries. Your trust will have a Cuba clause. The Cuba clause allows your trust to migrate from one jurisdiction to another when troubles arise. It's very common to start in a nice, clean jurisdiction without asset protection laws. That could be England. It could be St. Lucia, one of my very favorite places. It could be almost any place where they have, based upon the English common law, anything where they speak English is probably going to be a good place to start. And you oftentimes move to a place like the Cook Islands or Belize, both of which have great asset protection laws. Belize is a lot easier because of its time zone, and there's a lot more trust companies, a lot more competition, and a lot less relationships between the trust companies and the banks. I think there's a lot of common ownership, which results in a lot of hidden fees in the Cooks. They're not my favorite jurisdiction, but they certainly have great laws, and I use them a lot. You just don't have a lot of choices there. Your trust is going to have an excluded person designation. That's going to mean that if you have some people that you, other than just general creditors, you want to exclude, such as your former mother-in-law who's been suing you every year, or things like that. If somebody's got a real thing for you, you'll always designate them as somebody who never can ever benefit from the assets held in trust. Statute of limitations. You should expect a short statute of limitations. This is one of the key elements that you use when somebody comes to attack your funds that you've placed abroad. Well, I'm going to show you the statute of limitations in Belize. This is fabulous. Belize has, the Belize Trust Act provides that where a trust is created under the laws of Belize, the court shall not vary it or set it aside. Basically, that's the rule. Any law, any trust set up under the laws of Belize shall not be set aside. Belize does have fraudulent conveyancing laws, but specifically in Section 6 and 7 of Section 7 of the Asset Protection Act, this specifically eliminates the impact of the fraudulent conveyance laws on Belizean registered asset protection trusts. Registered asset protection trusts. Look, this is really good. This is really great. It says the court shall not vary it or set it aside or recognize the validity of any claim against the trust property pursuant to the law of another jurisdiction or the order of a court of another jurisdiction in respect of. Now look at this. The personal and proprietary consequences of marriage. Wow. So that means if you're about to get married or you're about to face a divorce and you have some separate property or what is arguably separate property and you feel pretty comfortable about that, well, anybody who comes to challenge that in Belize is going to be out of luck. SOL. You're going to keep your money. They're not even going to be able to go to court. They're going to be squeezed out in a secret in-camera proceeding. Now here's another thing that can never be challenged, the succession right, including the fixed shares of spouses or relatives. That means if somebody challenges money that you've inherited, that you've put into a trust, they're going to be squeezed out. They're not even going to be heard in Belize. Or the claims of creditors in an insolvency. Anything's an insolvency when an creditor is after you in Belize. So basically it says the claims of creditors are not going to be heard in a Belizean court, period, even if it were a fraudulent conveyance that founded or that funded the trust. This is hugely powerful. This is the best set of laws in the world on asset protection. The Cooks are a close second. Back to what you should expect. And in addition to the statute of limitations, you should expect the statute of Elizabeth override. I just showed that to you. It's kind of a backwards approach in Belize, but it's very common for a lot of countries simply to say, we're not going to have fraudulent conveyances, we're not going to recognize fraudulent conveyances, or they override it by making the statute of limitations on fraudulent conveyances so short as to be irrelevant. But Belize has done it the most elegant way of all. They simply say, if you register a trust in Belize and we accept you, then you are not going to be subject to attack because of a fraudulent conveyance claim, period, under the laws of Belize. I love this legal fees and costs right here. This is true of most jurisdictions that you'd want to go to for an asset protection trust. I like Belize even better because they almost always make the creditor post bonds to pay your legal fees and expenses if you are sued and win, which you're almost certainly going to win. And something really good about this legal fees, if we do the trust with the LLC, there's a provision called paragraph 37.7 in the LLC Act that says if anybody wants to sue you and recover money in an LLC, they actually have to post cash, not a bond, cash equal to 1/2 of the amount claimed. They have to pay this to the judge. It's held as a cash bond to pay your legal fees when you win, period. I like secrecy. Secrecy is important. In Belize and in most places, but Belize is even better, they do not report to the register, the person who regulates trust in Balmopon, the capital. They do not report the settlor of the trust's personal information, or they don't give that information in a way that can be disclosed to the public. The only person who knows the beneficial owner of the trust is the lawyer who sets the trust up. It's covered by his attorney-client privilege, and yes, a beneficiary of the trust who shows that they are a real beneficiary can usually get somebody in Belize, like the financial services sector administrator or the trust company, to simply speak with them and disclose the information. But normally they won't talk to anybody, period. And it's very strict. I really also almost always have a power of appointment provision in the trusts, and I've leaned on the lawyers preparing this to put a power of appointment provision in. And that is so that you can coordinate your asset protection trust with your estate plan, your will, or your estate planning trust. Most practitioners engage in a practice which I think is dubious at best. They make their asset protection trust a complicated estate planning document with state-of-the-art provisions dealing with the current tax code. They do that not just to show how smart they are, which isn't really a good idea to do anything. They do that so that you're forced to come and pay them $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 every time the law changes or you want to change your estate plan. And you shouldn't have to do it. You should be able to amend your will and have your asset protection trust automatically follow if you want it to follow. And I like the provision of registering a trust because it really shows that you settle it and it's registered. About half the jurisdictions allow registration and half of them don't. Taxation. Taxation is benign. This is a grantor trust. It's every single dollar this trust makes is taxed to the settlor, who's you. I believe you have a strong reason to report this trust as foreign. It's maybe not foreign, but there's no harm in reporting it as foreign. You just simply have to file the 3520 and the other forms that foreign trusts are, disclosure forms that foreign trusts are required to form. They're not complicated. They don't take very much time. They certainly don't cost any taxes, and they basically make you very, very, very less likely to be audited or have any trouble. The IRS has thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are not doing things correctly, and they're focusing their attention there. You make sure you do everything right. And as part of this process, you're going to be getting the copy of the tax forms, and you'll be getting a reminder, a note reminding you of exactly what to do. You take that note to your CPA, and there won't be any issues. The only problem with this structure that we've talked about with this type of trust is control. It's right here, control, my old bugaboo. Well, how do we solve the control problem? We solve the whole control problem by putting a Belizean LLC. Remember, with the Belizean LLC, I'm going to go right back here, with the Belizean LLC, right here, this little pink thing, you're the manager. Here's where your control comes from. That's the only reason you can afford to have this trust company have power over the trust, because the trust will have no assets. It will have only the assets that are in the LLC and any other business entities you put into it. But this trust company will have no capacity to steal these assets. Because remember, you should never trust anybody, period, at any time, ever, 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 ever. Our next video is on the LLC. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to go over the act with you. I'm going to show you what a typical Belizean LLC will look like. The law is only a few weeks old at the time of putting this video together, so it's evolving. But I just was at the Prime Minister's office 2 weeks ago, got the recent regulations, and believe me, we're going to have the ultimate state-of-the-art Belizean LLC. It's almost done. Now, guys, here's your job. You decide what you want. Do you want just a trust? Bad choice. Do you want the trust, the LLC, with the option of the bank account? Good choice. It's cheap and solid and will provide for all of your offshore needs. And the only other one is, do you want to add the domestic family limited partnership? You're getting everything for next to nothing, and you're getting all your documentation for free. Again, being provided by the people doing the work, not because they're crazy, but because they want a long-run relationship. I'll see you soon. We'll be talking about the Belizean LLC. Look for reminders in email, and we'll talk soon. Thank you. This is Rob.